Hello. In this video, as well as most of my other ones, I'd like to discuss things that belong to the food for thought category. Things that often get overlooked in the process of covering the different topics at hand. Things like not so much using the gun, but whether one should or not at a given situation. Let me start off by saying that I'm no attorney, and I'm not trying to give legal advice in any way, but that rather I've been thinking and reading a lot about recent points of view presented by many on the topic of stand your ground laws and its results and effects, and would like to discuss some of my thoughts here with you all today. Here in Texas we have a stand your ground law, very similar to what they have in Florida. And as most of us will remember the tragic case of the shooting of Trayvon Martin, the issue of standing your ground and no retreat laws become highly criticized and discussed factors of such legal proceedings. This should be a very significant point of realization that we all, as concealed carry license holders and a person that's carrying a gun, must have a good understanding of these laws in the states where we live. Because if and when these charges are filed against us, it's often the interpretations of these laws by the local prosecuting attorney that will influence the decision process of the trials against us. By the time we're in court having to defend our rights as someone that's been portrayed at fault, it becomes a case of he or she trying to say how the law didn't apply to what we did, and our attorney explanation of how it did and we were justified to use deadly force. The written laws of the state that deal with this topic often become misinterpreted and selectively applied to the case in order to prove a point of which may not be in our best interest, despite the rights we might have had or felt we had when we picked up the gun to use it. The use of the gun to defend life and whether it can be held legally exempt from prosecution is written into the laws, and unfortunately far too often to be determined in court. It is here that all the picking and poking of the laws take place, and the whole thing gets into gray areas. All of a sudden that criminal that had tried to rob us, very likely hurt or kill us in the process, is now being defended as having more rights than you and I, because he's not here to defend himself. And while this is not a terrible concept, and perhaps a good sound legal system should allow for this, the resulting attempts at holding us responsible to have defend ourselves is a sign of the times and the state of the society that has brought us to where we are now. A seeming lawlessness that allows crime to be ever present, and us having to be in fear of our life far too often. If you decide to take my car or possession by force, regardless of whether you have to kill or hurt me in the process, then you have no rights and deserve to be put out of your miserable existence. I consider myself a reasonable, responsible concealed handgun license holder and take somewhat of an informed position on carrying a handgun on my person for the purpose of defense of life, be it mine or any loved ones around me. We should be very careful in understanding that the possession of the concealed license does not make us a police officer to interpret right and wrong or grant us some legal justification to go out and fight crime. The only right this license brings us is the legal possession of the firearm, and not its use. Did that evening have to go that way for Trayvon and Zimmerman? I don't know. More likely no. Did Zimmerman go to investigate what was going on out of genuine concern and not too unrelated to his neighborhood watch position, rather than not doing so as he was told by the police? Yeah, probably did. I do know that there's a young man who won't be here to explain to us what happened and where things went wrong. And all we have to go by is Zimmerman's version of the events. You and I could be the parents of Trayvon, having lost our child and wondering why and wanting justice and some answers. Was there a fight, and did Zimmerman feel the need to defend his life by the use of his gun? Well, apparently the facts seem to point that way, as stated by police officers and witnesses. So, as is apparent here, things will get out of control in a hurry, it seems. And in a moment of panic and desperation, we might make decisions that would have to be defended and speculated. And that's where avoidance may not be such a bad idea. Defense of life, whether legal or not, should be exactly that. Last resort and action in defense of life. As a figure of speech, there's a saying, shoot if you must, and we will sort it out in court later. I'm not saying we shouldn't use our gun. After all, it's our right, and that's why we have the gun with us, and it's certainly something that I would not hesitate in using if it was to be my last choice. And I would recommend you do also, to defend one's right and not be a victim to somebody's act of aggression. But what I am saying is, if I have the presence of mind and have a good understanding of situational awareness and can avoid the situation before I get into it, or even see a safe way out of it, then maybe not using my gun would be a smart choice. This is a very personal decision that we all must think about, since one person's logic and decision may not be necessarily yours. But ultimately, the possible ramifications of this decision will be yours, at whatever expense they come at. While I'm not here to take sides in trials of this nature and somehow try and say who's right and who's wrong, I would like to point out something in our legal system that totally leaves me confused and perhaps needs to be looked at very closely. During what was perhaps one of our most publicized court cases, here and I'm sure around the world, a man can be arrested and charged with murder, and after a long and drawn-out fight in court, as witnessed by all of us, the glove didn't fit and he was found innocent, and charges against him couldn't be proven and consequently dismissed. And then came all the lawsuits, and he having to pay large sums of money to the families of the victims. Again, I'm not here to tell you whether he did it or not. And why do I bring this up? Because let's face it, that could have been you or I having to defend ourselves in court. Perhaps we had to shoot someone that had no way of getting where he was going without taking our car, and decided that he was going to do what he wanted, regardless of me or my life's value. After the law takes its course and it's decided that, we're right in doing what we did, and we're found innocent of any charges filed against us, it then becomes a case that dead men don't sue, but their families do. Often we can be taken to civil court and sued for something that legally we were found not guilty of, and may end up having to pay monetary compensation and end up having to defend ourselves all over again. And let's not forget that legal matters and court representations by attorneys and etc. are often a big expense, and we'll have to pay that for that too. The Texas Senate Bill 378 of the year 2007 holds the person being charged with the use of deadly force to defend one's life immune from such civil lawsuits if he or she is found innocent of these charges based on certain conditions that are covered under the Penal Code, Section 9, pertaining to the justified use of deadly force. And it also introduced the concept of no retrieve requirement in such cases. In other words, one is not required to withdraw from the situation at hand in which one's life is being threatened and one reasonably believes that the use of deadly force is necessary to prevent bodily harm or death. This was what is commonly referred to as stand your ground law, by extending the benefit of the existing castle doctrine, which generally covers the right to defend oneself and property while at home. This was an old English law that considered home a castle, and consequently it was called the Castle Doctrine. What the Senate Bill 378 modified was the inclusion of one's car in any place that one is legally allowed to be. So as a result, one is afforded the right to defend life by the use of deadly force while away from home, and without the obligation to retreat from the situation. It's probably in our best interest to find out if such accommodations exist in the state laws where we live. And ultimately, most importantly, and our responsibility to decide whether it isn't smart to just simply walk away from a confrontation, if it's safely possible to do without putting us in a position of being harmed or killed. None of these laws give us the right to shoot someone because we were being threatened, or there was fists being shaken at us, or he was standing by the car door, wouldn't let me go, or I was sure he had a gun, was scared he was going to shoot me. Nothing other than I was reasonably certain that I was about to be injured or killed. Because in court, 12 people with like lifestyles and ages, in other words, a juror of my peers, will have to be convinced of my reasonable belief of need to defend myself in order for me to be found legally justified to use of that deadly force. I truly hope that I haven't casted any doubts on your mindset on the use of your gun, but rather that I may have stirred up a little thought on what you ought to do in looking up these laws and their exact wording and their meanings, since they're often misunderstood and we assume them to be in our favor. I would hate for anyone to have find out the hard way that the laws didn't mean what we thought when it's too late. These are serious concepts that call for some thought and consideration. And so I hope that we will all go and do our best to find out about our state laws and become informed on how they affect us, and consequently be better prepared for what we may come across and have to deal with. And that we will practice safe gun ownership and learn to become efficient with our choices and enjoy our guns and shoot them often and have fun in doing so. I would like to encourage any comments or questions. If you have any questions that I may be able to answer for you, or any comments of what we have talked about here today, please be sure and leave a comment below. I will try my very best to answer your questions and answer your comments and welcome them. And as always, if you like this video and you feel like it's of some use to you, I would appreciate it if you gave me a like. And feel free to subscribe. I will continue to have more videos. And as always, it's been a pleasure bringing this to you and talking with you all here today. And I thank you for your time and look forward to speaking with you all again. Thank you and have a good day.